Let's go back to the 45 million rand lease story involving the IDT, and Azarrah Karrim is from AmaBhungane and will just talk to us about her investigation and her team's investigation into the story. So, Azarrah, before we lost signal, I was asking you about how this lease was able to be pushed through and what red flags were ignored along the way.
So earlier this month, AmaBhungane published a two-part investigation into the minister and his comrade, who is then chairperson of the IDT board, Kwazi Mshengu's efforts to stifle investigations into this matter. Now, the IDT CEO, Malaka, allegedly approved a 45 million rand lease deal, and she did this by approving it beyond her delegation of authority and behind the board's back. So the allegations are that she signed the lease along with a politically exposed company and didn't tell the board that she had done this. And when it was time for board approval, she allegedly submitted an unsigned lease to obtain that approval after she had already signed the deal.
Azarrah, what concrete evidence suggests that, he was the former minister in that portfolio, Zikalala, and then IDT chair Kwazi Mshengu, actively derailed efforts to properly investigate Malaka's conduct?
So our investigation is based on draft reports from the board to the minister, extensive board minutes in committee meetings, and internal communication from the IDT. It was a two-part investigation that showed how the then chairperson, Kwazi Mshengu, halted a National Treasury investigation that was already looking at the procurement of the lease and the allegations against Malaka. After his appointment to the board, when Zikalala put the previous board on terms, citing reasons that they should not be fired, Mshengu promptly halted National Treasury's investigation. And in fact, at that point, Treasury told AmaBhungane that they had a draft report ready and had started consultations with the Hawks. But what Zikalala has to answer for today is his efforts after Mshengu passed that investigation onto his department. Now, Zikalala sent us the report from that probe from his department, but that was not a forensic investigation at all. It was, in fact, an assurance audit that only probed the process, the procurement process followed for the lease procurement. It never probed any allegations against Malaka or any other IDT official. And that was a mandate that was approved by the board and Zikalala at the time.
How did, when you say Mshengu halted the National Treasury's forensic investigation, how was he able to be successful in doing that? As you say, they had a draft report ready. It seemed as if it was, at a stage, a state of development.
So there was some disagreement between the previous board and Mshengu's board as to how that National Treasury investigation was actually commissioned. So while the previous board wanted to go to National Treasury and wanted to inquire if they could do this investigation as an independent third party on behalf of the board, the company secretary went to Treasury, who confirmed they could do it. And instead of going back to the board, it's alleged that she simply kickstarted that process. Now, there's a question of whether she should have done that or whether she should have simply inquired about the possibility of that investigation happening. So Mshengu said that was a contamination of the process. And instead of issuing a board resolution to mandate that investigation, that board instead halted.
Azarrah, you talked about this, we call it a replacement probe by Zikalala's department, which, as you say, seemed to have just, fallen completely short in terms of its scope, in terms of reference of any real accountability. But there were also warnings from the internal auditors about their limited mandate. Zikalala claimed that no wrongdoing was found. How do you interpret this contradiction? Does it seem to have been negligence, or does it seem to have been something a little more sinister and strategic?
Yeah. So when that Mshengu passed the mandate for the investigation to Zikalala's department, that probe went to the intergovernmental relations units and the audit committee. And that audit committee made it very, very clear to Zikalala and the board that they did not have the resources to probe conflicts of interest, whistleblower reports, and so on. Despite that, they then recommended that the matter go for yet another investigation with the anti-corruption unit within the department. But before that investigation could be done, and 9 days before the 2024 national elections, Zikalala addressed a letter to the IDT board endorsing his support for Malaka's appointment as permanent CEO on the basis that his investigation found no wrongdoing against Malaka. That's obviously untrue. The investigation actually never investigated anything to do with Malaka. Yeah. That second investigation, however, we understand was completed this year in February and is awaiting the sign-off of the DG.
And as you referenced now, the timing of Malaka's appointment just days before the 2024 election has raised suspicions. Do you see it as a political maneuver? And if so, who ultimately benefits from it?
Well, I think that along with Mshengu signing off on Malaka's appointment on the eve of the new GNU ministers being sworn in, and when a DA minister replaced Zikalala, I think there are certainly questions to be asked as to who is doing whose job here. And who is protecting who, and for what reason? And I think these are the questions that Zikalala will have to answer for today.
You talked about the new minister, and this is Dean McPherson. Now that the Hawks and the Treasury have reportedly gathered evidence, is there likely to be accountability, and what steps then should this new minister take?
Well, first of all, I think that there's some things that the minister can't do. For example, I think that the IDT needs to recommission National Treasury, receive that report that Mshengu refused to receive, and finalize it, first of all. And then I think going forward, there was efforts by the IDT to set aside the lease deal in court. And this month, the judgment was received on that, and the IDT failed in those efforts. But it failed because the founding affidavit in that case was deposed by none other than Malaka herself, who was very compromised in deposing that affidavit. Yeah. I think that there needs to be investigations into how that happened, and possibly looking at appealing that decision. The minister is already in the midst of appointing a new board that will come in July. So we'll wait and see what they do. But he has commissioned investigations into, for example, the PSA oxygen contract. I'm not sure. You'll have to ask him if he'll commission another one into the lease deal.
Certainly got a lot in his inbox. Now, Malaka, for her part, has remained silent, Azarrah, based on your investigation. What are some of the key questions that she's got to answer publicly to restore trust in the IDT?
Yes, Malaka has remained silent. She did not respond to AmaBhungane's request for comment, but instead, quite interestingly, a social media campaign started, and this happens a lot when we send questions to the IDT on our stories. A social media campaign is ignited against myself, AmaBhungane, and its co-founder Sam Soul, saying that we are doing people's biddings and we're targeting certain people in the IDT. And so that's quite interesting. But Malaka will have to answer for what exactly she did to approve that lease deal. Did she go behind the board's back? Did she approve it beyond her delegation of authority? What is her relationship to the company who won that lease, which is a politically exposed company? Yeah. Unfortunately, she remains silent, but perhaps Zikalala can shed some light on that today.
Are you going to that news conference?
Yes, I'm here right now.
Okay, good. Well, we'll watch as you hold the ministers or the deputy ministers' feet to the fire together with our reporting team. Juanita Hunter is there for us as well. We'll take those proceedings live. Azarrah Karrim, thank you for your time this morning and for explaining the fruit of your investigation with the AmaBhungane investigative team. All right.